Hello there, Americans. I suppose you all know that I'm quite knowledgeable about your country. Perhaps if you would disdain from stuffing your faces with fast food and clogging your ears with willy-nilly Nelson, then perhaps you would retain something I'm saying. Now, there's something you ought to know about me. It is this. I am very, very old. Hundreds and hundreds of years old, actually. Now, I'm certain you're wondering, hey, how'd that fella get so old anyhow? Ain't he supposed to be dead? For a typical human being, this would be surprising. However, I'm somewhat of a special case. You see, I was born in the late 1100s as a poor peasant until one day... In fact, I remember it like it was yesterday. What? Well, what's this?
Who dares awaken the Master, Spud?
It is I, Dorian, a mere peasant.
A mere peasant you shall be no more, meek Dorian. For anyone who extracts me from the earthy soil is granted one wish. After that person is tested.
Alright, well, what's the test?
You must destroy your home and all you care about.
Alright, it's finished. Now, what do you wish for me to do?
Well, you must eat of my potatoey flesh.
Really?
No, not really. What do you wish for?
And so I wish for and obtained eternal life. However, this tidbit is unimportant. You came here for a talk on the American Revolution. Well, in order to do so, we must first start with the Magna Carta, which was drafted in 1215. This fancy little document was drafted in an effort to combat the tyranny of King John, who, contrary to popular belief, was not overthrown by a merry man in green tights. Anyway, this document was a very good thing for me because it meant that the king was restricted and could not do whatever he pleased. This was also a rather good thing for your future America, because it showed the king that even he was under the laws, and pipsqueaks could overthrow him if they pleased. As the years progressed, I ran away from my humble little abode to pursue greater endeavors. Finally, I established my own company and excelled in the business of agriculture as I founded my company, England's Finest Potatoes. This business grew quite steadily, and by the year of 1517, monetarily, I was very well set and practically wallowing in wealth. However, in my Germany plant, I used the assistance of young, fresh youth who wouldn't allow me to pay them a pence for their endeavors. Some of the more roguish viewers may call it child slavery, but that's such an unfortunate term. However, a thick-headed fellow named Martin Luther saw my business unfair or evil, and fought to shut it down, putting me in a bit of a pickle. After he ruined me, I developed a strong hatred for that German monk. So, in order to know my enemy, I studied him intensively. I learned that in 1517 he got fed up with the Catholic Church and nailed a number of theses to the door of one of the churches so that the priests and bishops would see their error of the ways and try to reform the church, who was corrupt with things like literally paying their way into heaven and no one being able to read their Bibles. Luther almost behaved as a Batman sort of figure, seeking vengeance on corrupt systems. This allowed the priests to justify, I'm making heavy use of the quotation marks at the moment, their teachings biblically.
And the Lord spake unto his people, Thou shalt give the priest large sums of wealth, and thou shalt prepare him meals so that he may not go hungry, and thou shalt...
Excuse me. What book are you reading from?
Why, it is the book of Exoclastes. Yes, Exoclastes, of course.
Do you expect me to believe that's actually a book?
Heresy! Heresy! This man is committing heresy! Burn him at the stake!
Luther wanted the church merely to change so that he made a public announcement to inform the people of what was truly happening. So they planned on killing him in a brutal way. However, the monk fled before the church or I could get a hold of him. Well, this caused quite a ruckus, and his little rambunctious snot-nosed followers were coined as Protestants, on the account of them protesting the Catholic Church. From that day on, I vowed vengeance against the Protestants, who would later become a major part of the founding of the good old United States. for many of those who inhabited the Americas were indeed members of the accursed lot of the Protestants. Over the next 15 years or so, I became well acquainted with my good friend King Henry VIII of England. The day was a calm, breezy day in the year of 1533 when I remember speaking with him over a nice, supple dinner.
I say, Dorian, I've never met a man who can tell such funny turtle jokes.
Oh, it's a gift, I suppose. So how have things been going, Henry?
Well, that good-for-nothing wife of mine is giving me trouble.
Really now? How so?
The blasted woman won't give me the heir to her throne. You see, Dorian, I've concluded that a successful kingdom is much like a human being, and that neither one can survive without heir.
Well, perhaps you ought to find yourself a new wife.
Dorian! You are a genius! I'll consult the Pope immediately.
5.5 days later.
I cannot believe the Pope forbade me a divorce. The Pope thinks he's so high and mighty. He thinks he can just do whatever he wants in the church. Do you really think he would not divorce his wife if he impregnated her and the woman produced a worthless girl? It's not fair.
You could always disobey him and start your own church.
What a dandy idea! You are a genius, Dorian.
As a result of my brilliant ideas, Henry separated from the Catholic Church in 1534 and started his own, the Anglican Church, or the Church of England, which loosely translates into the Catholic Church of Henry does what he pleases, so get over it. After King Henry circulated through many bad wives, he finally found one that gave him a fine, strapping young lad to rule the kingdom after Henry had bit the dust in 1547. The lad was named Edward VI, who was a snot-nosed little brat and friend of the Protestants, who took his father's throne at a very young age. Of course he was too young to comprehend the evils of the Protestant religion. Nonetheless, I hired my alchemists and philosophers to invent a catapult that would sling barrelfuls of large poisonous reptiles into his bedroom window. However, before the project was ready for its mission, the dirty Protestant lover fell ill and died. So instead, I tested my machine on random servants and giggled at their responses. Ha 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 ha. While I was flinging poison to reptiles at my personal subject, a man named John Calvin was becoming rather popular in the world of religion. This gentleman was a Protestant writer and reformer who wrote highly influential things like the Institute of Christian Religions, which were published in 1536. These institutes would be used by the founding fathers somewhat, but mostly by people like John Locke and Algernon Sidney. But that is later in history. After the little Edward kicked the bucket, much to my delight, of course, his sister Mary I came to power. Now, you may have heard her called Bloody Mary, or other dreadful nicknames, but Mary was not a bad woman at all. Yeah, she had a pet peeve regarding the Protestants and sort of like the idea of Catholicism, but she really was a fine woman. She wrote poetry, and she was interesting and opinionated. She acted with poise and intelligence. She had the most endearing little laugh. The way the sunlight hit her hair on a summer afternoon was simply breathtaking, and made me forget about all my woes in the world. In fact...
sorry. Anyway, yes, she killed Protestants and what have you, but she was a very good queen. Someone who needed to put those Protestants in their place, and who better than my mare?
Oh, Mary, how I miss you so. Anyway, she was run out of town by vicious and unappreciated members of the society, who placed Mary with her light-hearted, flirtatious little half-sister named Queen Elizabeth in 1558. Now, with my dashing good looks, vast intelligence, and money pouring out of multiple wazoos that I was wealthy enough to buy, Elizabeth instantly had the hots for me. But I simply told her that I was way out of her league, so she took a bitter vow to never love again and died the Virgin Queen. In her sorrow, she developed a dull apathy for everything in existence, which made her one of the most beloved queens in English history. So she reigned over the Protestants and the Catholics alike, dreamily thinking about me and not caring enough to take sides. However, the popular, perpetually broken-hearted queen died in 1603. Now, because of my refusal to become part of the royal family, which in hindsight was not the best choice considering I would be the permanent ultimate ruler of England, she had no heir, and a new family seized the throne in 1603. The Stuarts. The first Stuart to rule England was a man named King James I. Having a thing for establishing relationships with English monarchs who were remotely related to the development of the American Revolution, I began to know James and listen to him rattle on about the divine right of kings, a belief that a king is appointed by God as an absolute ruler who no one should ever oppose. People like Luther and Calvin thought that kings should be limited and fought against these ideas. However, James was sensible enough to keep these ideas of forcing Catholicism to himself, despite my prodding for him to destroy the Protestants. However, in 1620 I had better luck with his newly king's son.
Good night, Mr. Fluffies.
Charles the First!
Yes! Who are you?
I am the Lord, here to tell you that you have been chosen by me to rule England with absolute power. That is right, Charles. Everything your father and his very handsome, attractive, and really cool friend said was completely true. You must oppress the Protestants who defy me, and my doctrine and my people, for they...
What? What? Oh, all right, call me sacrilegious for posing as God to get a king to do my bidding against a demographic that I hate, but it's just business. Business, I say. Anyway, regardless of your stupid opinion, Charles listened to his father and I's advice and dominated the Protestants like the potato company hating pansies they are. So out of fear from the crazy tyrannous king, many Protestants came to the Americas as an escape for religious freedom and established the first remotely successful colony of the United States around 1620, when Charles came to the throne. The pesky lot of Puritans would end up giving me a rather large headache later on, but an ocean was not an easy thing to cross. However, as the Protestants slipped through my fingers, writers like John Locke and Algernon Sidney rose to fame. One of Locke's biggest points was that religious toleration in the colonies and separation of church and state was an ideal way of ruling a government, an idea attained from Calvin and Luther regurgitating into the founding fathers of America. Sidney's controversial writings mostly express how a king should be overthrown when he oppresses the rights of a people. Obviously, King Charles did not take kindly to these views and killed Sidney because of them. So as Charles was rampaging and doing my handiwork in 1641, the English Civil War broke loose between those faithful to Charles and those who opposed him. 3 years later, a man named Samuel Rutherford wrote a book called Lex Rex, which is Latin for "the law is king," and basically preached that the king was also under a law. So, as one can clearly see, literature itself was rebelling against King Charles, who oppressed the Protestants and attempted to dissolve Parliament. Unfortunately, my funny little puppet Charles lost the war and was beheaded by a bunch of angry Englishmen. After this victory, a man named Oliver Cromwell took over England in 1653 and called himself Lord Protector over his new government, the English Commonwealth. This system heavily emphasized the freedom of religion unless you were Catholic, of course. This government worked out quite well for a while until the mysterious death of Mr. Cromwell, who worked so hard to protect the Protestants. So after Cromwell is disposed of, Charles II takes the throne. After seeing his brother's severed head acting as a prized trophy of the Protestants, he was not exactly eager to suppress the group at all, and even begins a period that starts in 1660 called the Restoration, a frame of time where the members of the Reformed Church rose up again into society. This lasted for a good long while until he died 25 years later, and his relative James II ascended to the throne. Like James I and Charles I, he disliked the pesky Protestants and went back to oppressing the Protestants all the time in the name of the divine right. However, this only lasted from 85 to 88, until the people got fed up with being pulled back and forth like a potato between 2 of my starving slaves, and overthrew the king in a movement called the Glorious Revolution, or the Bloodless Revolution on the account of there being no bloodshed. As a result, William and Mary take the throne and rule for years as some of the most beloved monarch in English history. This whole tricky business of overthrowing, replacing, and repeating really showed the world that, no matter what monarch said, they really were just people who could be overthrown by other people if they got angry enough. This type of thinking was obviously adopted in the American Revolution. However, all the events in England after the Commonwealth I heard by word of mouth, for I departed England as soon as Cromwell was disposed of, because I thought Charles II was a pansy for succumbing to the Protestants out of fear, says the man who can't die. So instead I sailed across the ocean blue and set up a potato plantation in the States, who are experimenting like mad with new governments. Though I'm not the biggest fan of Locke, Luther, Sidney, or Calvin, they all appear to be very right regarding the separation of church and state. No, this does not mean take down that baby Jesus display across the street because it offends me. But that's what you ninnies have made out of it. Americans have a way of horribly misinterpreting things, you know. No, this phrase simply means the churches should not put you on trial and courthouses should not hold Sunday school. The Americans all saw this principle proven in Massachusetts in 1692, the year of the forced Christmas carol singing day of December 23rd. Hundreds were imprisoned for refusing to belt out songs of the infant Jesus is coming to earth. In the aftermath, well, it was treacherous. Also, the Salem witch trials took place. Basically, this consisted of some women being mistaken for witches and burned at the stake. So this went on, and yes, it was atrocious, but it showed that government and law enforcement really should not intermingle with the church at all. More terrible things are quite certainly going to happen. So, as things panned out in Salem, not everywhere was terrible. I myself settled in Connecticut and witnessed the construction of Yale University in 1701. This, of course, was not the first or only college in the colonies. Harvard, the first colonial college, was established in 1636. The College of William and Mary was created in 1693, and Princeton came about in 1746. I attended all of these prestigious colleges and attained doctorates in everything. Now there were no Oxford or Cambridge, but they were still decent little schools. Unfortunately, they were run by Puritans, the plague of my life, and taught blatant rebellion against their own mother country. Now, I found this atrocious and was nearly set on fire by Princeton attendees because I was a loyalist. I found the College of William and Mary most suitable for my liking, out of the four colleges, mostly because it focused on law, not religion. While I was there, I took classes from Professor George Wythe in 1660. He was a very outspoken man who chiefly taught on the ideals of men like William Blackstone and Sir Edward Coke. Both men like Locke, Luther, and Sidney taught that kings should not tyrannically rule over countries and oppress their God-given rights, such as life, liberty, and the right to own property. The men stated that these rights were ingrained deeply in a man and could not be rightfully taken away from them. Wythe taught these concepts with fervor and pride, but I do not remember much from that class. I think I recall I practiced my dueling skills extensively and remember drawing something to do with a kitten and a meat grinder. While not listening, I sat next to a young man named Thomas Jefferson. Thomas always bothered me, for he smelled like cheap candle wax, was overly opinionated, and snorted when he laughed. Also, I'm fairly certain I caught him picking his nose once, but I was never 100% sure. Anyway, I saw him as just an obnoxious ginger with no friends. So I mostly ignore him, as I ignore most people I only slightly hate. However, this fire-headed ginger would really become a pain in the fanny in the years to come, but we'll get to that later. In the year 1766, I returned to my homeland to visit the king, for I had not really gotten to know George III yet. I'll always remember that day when we played chess together. Well, sort of.
I'm being serious, Dory. I can see the Germans from my telescope. Look, see? Oh, man, it looks so Germany and German-like.
King George, perhaps we should get back to playing chess.
Yeah, you just go ahead and make a move for me.
Your Highness, that really almost defeats the purpose of chess. I really don't...
You want to challenge me, Dorian? Huh? You want to challenge me? There ain't nobody's gonna get away with challenging me. You stink Americans are all like that, I suppose. I don't know.
I'm not technically...
You know what I hate? I hate war debt. Them French is really a pain in the rear, you know? Man, it's expensive too.
I suppose so. Well, you could always tax to account for your monetary losses.
That is an amazing idea. I'm gonna tax the living poop out of them colonists. Just you wait, Dorian.
Well, Your Highness, I'm a colonist too. You have to realize that's hardly fair.
Okay. I'm gonna let you off the hook then, but let's get taxing on everybody else. 'Cause I'm the king, and you all better do what I want you to do.
So after this day, I resolved that I didn't really want to be friends with King George III at all. Sir Mad George did indeed end up taxing the feces out of the colonists, even though they were not being represented in Parliament, and taxing was against their consent. From 1765 throughout 1776, a heavy tension was built between colonists and the Brits. Not only did they tax everything they owned, they quartered soldiers in the house, and they were taking prisoners without a trial, which is a violation of the writ of habeas corpus. So, as one could quite possibly imagine, the colonists were quite indeed angry at their oppression. I, being the filthy rich and sadistic Tory I am, found this oppression side-splittingly hilarious and giggled as I watched my Puritan nemesis biting the bullet of tyranny. In 1770, during a cold Boston winter, a massacre also took place. This started from a couple of naughty children throwing snowballs at redcoats. So the redcoats shot the children. Well, okay, they didn't really shoot the children. However, a fight did ensue, and 5 were killed in the brawl, including many more injured. The colonists were not so happy about this and continued to be oppressed throughout the 70s, but there were no pushovers, that's for certain. In 1773, colonists in Boston Harbor raided a British ship filled with tea, dumped it over the side as an act of rebellion against the outrageous tea tax. 2 things came from this event. The British were angry, and the fish of Boston Harbor had a lovely evening sipping tea, and lots of it. So the wise, collected, and calm King George decided it would be a splendid idea to declare war on the colonies. And in 1775, that is exactly what he did. As one might imagine, the colonies did not very much like what England was doing and believed in the writings of Calvin, Luther, Locke, Sidney, Blackstone, and Cook, in that each man was given inalienable rights that no one could take away. This silly belief most likely came from their excessive reading of the Bible, which can really get you to do nutty things. That's why I never read it, of course. Biblical principles were very deeply ingrained in education and everything the colonists did, and a hunch that separating was the rightful thing to do in the eyes of God was enough for the states not only to want to reform England, but to separate from her completely. So as you may have guessed, yes, I'm a veteran of the Revolutionary War, and yes, I was a Tory who fought against the Protestants. However, they must also eat. So I sold my potatoes to them, as well as the British, for a hefty price. So I came out of the war a richer man. Which is really what matters most, right? Anyway, my red-headed counterpart Tom Jefferson probably sat down on his floor and scribbled the Declaration of Independence in crayon while someone like Ben Franklin or John Adams rewrote it. But nonetheless, the American colonies disbanded from England, and the United States of America was born on July 4th of 1776. Though the redcoats fought valiantly against the accursed Puritans and Protestants and Pilgrims and Patriots, they did not succeed in subduing the unruly colonies, and the wise and insightful King George decided to end the war, and I quote, "Let them colonies have their stupid independence." So, in 1787, the newly formed USA wrote up their own constitution, which proposed a republic sort of government that is guided by a permanent document, and in 1791 they wrote a Bill of Rights, which is more or less just an extension of their ultimate guideline. And that's how your stupid, pitiful, worthless country came to be. I really did know Elizabeth. I promise I knew Elizabeth, and she was my friend. Come on, I'm an honest man. Would an honest man lie to you? Please, just listen to me. Why to know in this... It's so ironic. All right, Dorian. Okay, time's up for today. Thank you for your participation, Dorian. I really like talking about your feelings with you, okay? We'll talk to you tomorrow, okay? Everything's gonna be all right. Just hang in there, trooper. All right. Oh, jeez, oh, Pete's.
Hey, Dr. Schenkel, how's Dorian doing today?
Oh, Smith. I don't know. He seems to be fairly delusional. I can't seem to convince him he hasn't been alive since the 1100s. His misconceptions are so deeply ingrained in his subconscious that the poor man can no longer distinguish anything from reality.
Well, pardon me for sounding superstitious, but do you think he could really be that old?
Why, Smith, you're sounding crazier than King George III in a barrel full of large poisonous reptiles.
Oh, that's crazy.
All right. Well, I guess I'll see you later, Smith. Nice talking to you.
See you, Schenkel.
I wonder. Nah.